Welcome to everybody who has joined us this evening. My name is Peter Holton, and I am the Training and Engagement Officer for Northern England with Glaucoma UK. Our speakers this evening are Kesh and Gemma, and they will introduce themselves in more detail once we get going. They will talk us through this session on anxiety and mental health with glaucoma. I'm so glad so many of you have chosen to spend your evening with us, and I'm just going to spend a few minutes talking about the format of this evening's talk and a little bit about Zoom. There will be two short polls launched during the webinar. These are to help us see the difference the sessions are having. I'm going to launch the first one now, and this will stay open for about a minute or two. So if you just bear with me, I will get that launched for you. I've launched the poll now, so it should be on most of your screens. If you are using a screen reader, it should make a ping, and please don't forget to submit. That will be fantastic. We'll just give it this a minute or two to work. I will keep talking. After the presentation, we will have a Q&A session. So please post any relevant questions here in the Q&A box, and don't forget to like questions that others have asked so we can answer the most popular ones. If you're watching on our social media platforms, please do comment on the feed and your questions will be fed into the webinar. It's amazing what technology can do. Please be aware if using captions on Zoom, they may not be accurately translated. And don't forget to post questions that are on the topic of tonight's session in the Q&A. So before we get going in earnest, we are enormously grateful to Kesh and Gemma for generously giving up their time to present on this webinar this evening. We specifically invite speakers who are knowledgeable on the topic being presented. The information shared tonight is based on their own experience and knowledge and does not replace individual medical advice. Your circumstances are unique to you. We're all individuals, and that's what makes this a wonderful place, the world. So if you are thinking of making any lifestyle or medical changes as a result of this webinar, please do speak to your eye specialist first. Glaucoma UK and the speakers are not responsible for any action you might take as a result of the information you learn through this webinar. So now I will hand over to our two panelists who will introduce themselves a little bit more. And I'd like to say thank you before you start.
Okay, I have to start. I'm Gemma Ryder. I'm a counsellor and psychotherapist, and I coordinate the counselling team for Kent Association for the Blind's Counselling Service. And I have kind of two areas of specialty, really. One is trauma, and the other is supporting people with vision impairment and going through vision loss, and kind of all of that stuff around treatment and the hospital system. So that's why Peter's asked me to be here today. I am vision impaired myself. I'm totally blind, but not with glaucoma. And I'm very croaky. I apologise in advance. Not quite as bad as I was an hour ago, but I'm going to be doing lots of strepsils and cups of tea as we go along. So yeah, sorry about that. But yeah, I shall hand over to Kesh to say hello now before we carry on.
Thank you, Gemma. Thanks, Peter, for inviting me today. Good evening, everyone. My name's Kesh. I actually have a background in health and fitness, but I now work for Glaucoma UK and do various other bits and bobs for them, including what I'm doing tonight. I'm here, I guess, because I've lived with glaucoma for 25 years. I was diagnosed in my 20s. And it's been an interesting journey, and there's lots of things that I've been through, and I can share along that journey with you guys tonight. Hopefully, a lot of it will resonate, and hopefully, if anything, it will let you know that you're not alone. I'm also registered as severely sight impaired, but I don't see that as a limitation. So So yeah, let's get going. Over back to you, Gemma.
Okay, so just to kind of run through what we're going to be looking at, we're going to be looking at, I suppose, firstly, why mental health can be so affected by, I suppose, at each stage, isn't it, really? Diagnosis as well as treatment, even before we've had much impact with vision itself. I suppose the anxiety around potential future loss, what happens if things don't go well, isn't it? And we're going to be looking particularly at anxiety, because this is something that is so common and so normal as well, really. So we're going to be looking at anxiety, what we can do to help with anxiety. Yes, it's to be expected to some degree, but what can we do to ease that? Both in the moment, so say when we have to go to an eye appointment or a test, and also kind of more generally, how can we bring anxiety levels down? How can we, get feeling better, really? Self-help measures, and then we're going to talk a bit about therapy and where that might come in and how that might be helpful, and look a little bit about what's involved. So that's a bit of a start. And so then going right back to the beginning of the process, I suppose, I mean, it's easy to see why mental health is going to be affected even by a diagnosis when we've not got symptoms as such yet, isn't it? Because I think, physical and mental health are always so linked. There's often a lot of uncertainty, and uncertainty is hard to manage in itself, isn't it? And medical jargon often doesn't help, does it? Glaucoma may be something that perhaps you haven't even come across until getting a diagnosis. So it's something about having a new diagnosis to get your head around, a new treatment regime, fitting that into life, maybe making sure you get your questions answered or not, and then that kind of frustration where you've got to hang on to the questions for another time. This is where the Glaucoma UK helpline can come in. And sometimes to the eye clinic liaison officers, if you're lucky and have one of those in your local hospital, trying to get some of these questions answered. So lots of sources of anxiety, I think, even in the early days. And then, of course, hospital treatment too can be stressful at the best of times, can't it? Kesh, can I throw that over to you for if you sort of cast your mind back? It's going back a way for you.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of what you said, Gemma, kind of resonates actually. And the one thing that kind of sticks out is now I know this is the anxiety is normal. It's there for a reason. And I guess when I went back 25 years ago, I think I was 27 years old. And I was quite young, and I kind of literally got pulled into this consultant's office, and he was throwing all this jargon at me and saying I had glaucoma. And I went through all these feelings of kind of anger and frustration, which at the time I didn't realize, they are kind of normal, but a lot of that is just fueled by that underlying anxiety, because there is uncertainty, as you said. You don't know what this means for you, and it does mean something different for everyone, as well. For me as a young person, it meant something very different to someone who, well, to the age I am now, So that, I remember that day very vividly, and everything you said there kind of resonates. Yeah.
And I think hospitals can be a difficult place to be in anyway, can't they? Like for a lot of us, hospitals hold memories, are difficult experiences that we've had already. So before we even step in the eye clinic, many of us have had really difficult times in hospitals, right? So it's not our calmest place, is it? I think that and the waiting, of course, which increases anxiety for most of us, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And most of you listening today will have experienced that hospital visit or hospital appointment, and many of you probably through the NHS, as well. So I've kind of had I've experienced, and I still do, these 2 to 3 hour waits, and that in itself, when that's coming up, is a big source of anxiety. Even is for me now still, and I'm kind of,
Sure.
I'd say I'm well practiced, at this, but there's lots of ways, you know, that you can overcome this.
Yeah, I think that leads us in nicely, doesn't it, to the kind of troubleshooting some of these. So let's start with your tips then, Kesh, for managing those. You're saying it is still stressful sitting there for 3 hours, even when we're waiting on something life changing. So, you know, go on, start us off with some tips for managing that.
I mean, these things work for me, and I think I'll say from the outset, it's important to kind of find what works for you, because, you know, but I think ultimately for me, it's about finding space in my head. It's like kind of trying to increase that bandwidth. So I've got a little bit of space to kind of, you know, just kind of take that breath. And I guess that's probably the first thing I learned to do, is take a breath. You know, I know we hear it all the time, and, you know, it can get annoying, but it does work, you know, maybe not for everyone, but, you know, taking a few breaths, you know, one of the things I do regularly is meditate. So I'm used to that, but I know that's not for everyone. Sometimes just closing your eyes and taking that breath is all you need. Other strategies I use is I always have something I have a playlist. I have some music ready on my phone, and I have my headphones. I use these cool bone conduction headphones, so I can still hear what's going on.
Neat.
So
yeah.
I have that ready as well. But I guess taking a step back, as I go into the clinic, I find it really hard now to see those check-in screens, or in fact any kind of screen, you know, where you have to touch screens. So, you know, asking for help at the desk and asking, you know, where is the best place to sit? Because these clinics are massive. They're often so huge, with rows and rows, you know, of people waiting. And I often ask, well, where's the best place to sit so I can hear, or I can see, more importantly, for me, where the consultant's coming in. And then I plonk myself down there. You know, I listen to some music, which for me is kind of easy, kind of classical music, just on low, you know, and, you know, if I need to, I'll breathe. But it's one of those things now, it sounds like a whole rigmarole, but it's not. You know, for me, it's a habit. So I don't even think about that now. But in the beginning, I had to do this. I had to plan for it. I had to anticipate it, and I had to kind of put it in place and practice it. So
being organized.
Yeah.
But now that's your routine. That's your hospital routine. And what I noticed was that's doing a couple of things. Asking where the best place is to sit is obviously helpful, because you're less likely to get missed. But of course, you're also not worrying about getting missed in the same way, which I guess is part of the battle, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And keeping yourself entertained and making sure everything's charged. It is partly about planning, isn't it?
Yeah, I'll add one more thing as well, actually, is that, again, it's not just about that actual appointment. It's, again, if we go back a step and thinking about how you're going to get there as well, because anywhere where you can reduce that kind of stress or that low level anxiety is always going to be useful. So, you know, if you've got someone to take you, plan for that. You know, if they need to wait around, plan for that as well. Usually most hospitals have a coffee shop, so, you know, you can go and grab a coffee and wait there if you need to for someone to collect you or pick you up. They sound like really small things, but they make such a big difference when you put them all together. And of course, you know, the more that you do this, the easier it becomes. But like I said, you know, like waiting for that long isn't nice, you know. So
it's not nice for
good.
anybody, is it?
No.
And I think breathing we'll perhaps come back to, won't we? But in case I forget to say it later, breathing is amazing for calming, but it does need to be something that you practice when you're calm. And oftentimes when people say to me, breathing doesn't help, well, it doesn't help because you're only doing it when you're really panicky. So in the end, we associate it with being panicky. It really needs to be, I know you'll back me up here, Kesh, since meditation is how you spend some of your spare time. So it does need to be something that we practice when we're calm. Not necessarily blissful, just calm enough, you know, washing up or teeth cleaning or something. So that then when we do want to grab for it, somewhere like clinic, then we're able to do that.
Absolutely.
So that's kind of a bit about managing the whole hospital environment. Getting help, I guess, as well with getting questions answered. Sometimes people will, as I said earlier, they'll come out really frustrated that they haven't had things answered. and then take to making lists. And even if it's only 2 questions, actually making sure they've got something jotted down, asking to record the chat that they have with the doctor, and sometimes taking a friend or relative in, because I think under pressure, memory does not work at the best. This is a physical thing, isn't it? So making sure that we're able to get the most out of appointments. And I mentioned the eye clinic liaisons earlier, so I'm going to do that again. But if your eye clinic has one and you can ask at your hospital, they can be a great source of support, keeping patients company in appointments, and also translating jargon, which is often helpful, isn't it? Okay, so we're going to talk a bit about drops, Kesh, do you think? Because this can be a source of quite a lot of stress, can't it? Particularly early days, or when a prescription changes, right?
Yeah, absolutely. From my point of view, and I've had this for a long time now. Drops, when I first had them, I had lots of different questions. It's glaucoma's, as Gemma I think alluded to earlier. It's one of those things that is silent. And we often call it the silent thief. Of sight. And so you don't know it's there. There's not really any symptoms that you can kind of physically feel. So you kind of often question, why do I need these drops? And I have to admit, in the beginning, there were a couple of days when I went without my drops, and then I'd get stressed about not taking them. But they are a big part of your life, and they're there for a reason. Managing that intraocular pressure, or that IOP, is the only thing that the medical guys and the ophthalmologists can actually work on. So that's why it's so important to take those drops. And at the end of the day, they're trying to do is to preserve your vision. So I guess the first point is that know that they are important. The second point is get into a routine. You're going to see that word routine come back time and time again here.
Yeah.
It's so important, and there's various strategies around that, and some that work and some that may not work for you, but get that into a routine, because soon enough those eye drops won't feel like something that you have to endure, or something that you almost detest and hate to do. They'll just literally sit there in the background, and you won't even notice sometimes that you're doing it. I mean, I'll give you a great example. I normally take my eye drops at 7 in the morning and 7 in the evening. Now, obviously, we've got this webinar going on. I only just realized that I went up at 6:30 and did my eye drops just ahead, because that's absolutely fine, for me to do. It's only half an hour, but I didn't actually realize that I was doing that. So it's yeah.
So you've got very used to just juggling it around slightly.
Exactly.
But
yes.
certainly not missing that kind of 12-hour dose that
exactly.
you're doing. I guess in the same way, we clean our teeth because we've been trained from when we were small, and we don't give that a thought. It does take quite a while to get this kind of ingrained, doesn't it?
Yeah, and you mentioned brushing teeth there. If you've got your timings right, it's a good if you do need to do your drops in the mornings, put them by your toothbrush.
Do it with something else you always do.
Exactly, or the washing up, or for me, getting the dog's breakfast ready, or whatever, and it will soon slot right into your lifestyle.
Yeah. And if actually getting the drops in accurately is a problem, don't just muddle through stressing. Do talk to them at the eye clinic. Your local pharmacist is often able to assist. Again, the ECLOs, the eye clinic liaisons, there are various different types of droppers, aren't there? It does depend on the bottle that you've got, but various different gadgets to help you do that easier. So always worth raising that as well, I think, if it's going to take the pressure off a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will add there that, you're right. There are various different drop aids. And, if you want more information on that, do check out the resources on Glaucoma UK, because, we can supply those for you.
Again, it's those small things, isn't it, Kesh, really? It's kind of putting all those little bits together, really, to try and take the stress out of a week, I think.
Yes.
So overall, what you're trying to do is bring down the stress through a week. Which I suppose moves us on to the other types of ways that we can do that, doesn't it? Opening it up to You've already talked about meditation, of course. We've touched
Yes.
on breathing.
Yes.
There's all
Yeah.
sorts of other ways that aren't there that we can actually, if you do yoga once a week, that brings down your stress levels and potentially helps with anxiety through the whole week, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And yoga is one thing that I'd like to have more time to do. I've done it in the past, and it's great. But I think exercise in general, from my background, I put quite a lot of emphasis, on this. And
I
you
think
don't have to
so.
go to a gym, even if it's just walking out your back door and walking up and down your garden or around the block. If you've got dogs, you'll already be walking those anyway, and if you are sporty or you like to do exercise and train regularly, that it is useful, and beneficial, not just from, I guess, the physical side of it, but also from the mental health side of it. And there's a reason why exercise is prescribed across the board in a lot of mental health strategies.
Very much so, very much so. It's lifting mood, even without us having to do any more. I think then, like you say, get some movement. Doesn't even have to
Yes.
be hard exercise. Getting some
Yeah.
movement, fresh air, of course, is often involved in the exercise, but the fresh air in itself is doing you some good. Being outdoors is doing you some good, even when it's chilly, and
Yeah.
even for a few minutes.
Yeah.
I know there can be concerns around exercise and glaucoma. I know sometimes there are concerns about yoga. It's as far as I understand it, not advisable to be doing, headstands or for prolonged length of time. That sounds like pretty hardcore yoga to me, anyhow. I guess, as with all these things, discuss with your instructor, or and the same as you would if you were starting any new exercise, really. But like Kesh says, even gentle things, even getting out for a walk more is going to be helpful, isn't it?
Yeah, and you know what? Nowadays there are so many things. I mean, I know a lot of people hear this all the time, but it works. And most people will have a fitness tracker, and if they don't, they'll have their phone, which can record steps anyway, if it's in your
Mm-hmm.
pocket. So setting yourself a really simple step goal. If exercise is something that you want to start doing, just start by setting a step goal. You don't have to worry about getting all the equipment and all the clothing and then joining a gym. It really
That's a
is
good
so
start.
easy and accessible, nowadays. And, don't take my word for it. Go for a 20-minute regular kind of moderate walk and then notice how your mood feels afterwards, and it'll speak a lot.
Okay, so I guess what we need to talk a bit about then is when you're doing all those ordinary things and the mood's not lifting and the anxiety's still high. And for some people that will be the case. And partly, of course, that's to do with where we're at before the diagnosis, isn't it? It's where we're at before the treatment and how much we had going on already and what else is happening in our lives, and kind of how much else we've got to manage, I suppose. So we wanted to talk to you a bit about therapy, about counselling and how that might fit in and help, and a bit about what that involves. I'm just going to have a bit more of my tea. So where should we start with this bit? I think, you'll know yourself when you're starting to feel like you're not yourself and you're struggling. And that's often what I'll hear from clients, whether they've come via the eye clinic or whichever route they've come into the counselling service, is that they're not really feeling themselves. So it's more than just that natural anxiety or worry with a new diagnosis or a new treatment. It's hitting harder, if you like. And they're aware that they could do with a bit more support to be dealing with that. And I think the first reason that a lot of people find therapy helpful is because they've got somebody outside of their close circle to talk things through with. So someone who's not part of the family, they don't feel like they're burdening that person. That person doesn't have an agenda, so they don't have a particular direction that they're trying to kind of push the conversation or the outcome. So it's an outsider, somebody without that agenda, somebody, of course, where I'm working, who's kind of familiar with a lot of these issues, because I've got therapists in my team who are very familiar with the experience of vision loss. And sometimes that's very comforting for people, very reassuring to be talking to someone who kind of understands a bit about that hospital process, understands a bit about what treatment involves, or kind of what those feelings are about, I suppose. But it's also somebody, again, who can support to make changes that you might want to make, whether that's with lifestyle, filling your time better, maybe filling your time differently if your activities are being impacted by the glaucoma, of course, and supporting you to find ways of doing that kind of work for you. Sometimes, of course, it might be about dealing with older stuff, older memories. I talked about the hospital experience earlier. So for some people, they might actually be phobic going in the hospital. So what we want to deal with is actually that before, in order for them to benefit from their treatment at the moment, we want to kind of unpack some of that previous memory baggage, if you like, and stop that from interfering so much, and stopping them being able to kind of sit relatively calmly in the clinic and actually have their appointments and go through their treatment. Kesh, what else do I need to add?
I mean, I think you've raised quite a few good points there, and I'll certainly share my perspective because I don't mind doing that.
Yeah, that would be good as well. Thanks. Yeah.
And in that, there was a point when, I found it quite difficult, to kind of cope with living with glaucoma. And, first off, finding and asking for help was quite hard for me. I'm not ashamed to admit that. And, I now see that in a lot of other people. And I guess part of that was because I spent 30 years helping people and coaching them as a fitness coach. And then now suddenly I had to ask for help. And I find that hard, and I still do now. And Gemma made a really good point of, when talking to someone, sometimes it's nicer to talk to someone who is unbiased. And I found a really good therapist, who kind of helped me understand. And I'm not going to bore you, but there's a lot of stuff that, does need unpacking sometimes. But I think sometimes it's just nice to talk. And, I think, the fact that you're having a conversation about it, and the fact that you guys are here today and we're doing this, I think is a big step, and whether therapy, is something that you choose to follow or not, having those conversations, I think, is the key message there, at least for me anyway. Because I do believe, that when you start to kind of ask those questions, and talk about this more, it suddenly becomes really easy. It's like a weight lifted. So, I found therapy particularly, very, very useful, for me, more to really kind of help me, I guess, A, talk to someone completely different, and B, really kind of understand why I'm getting anxious, about these things, or why I'm getting frustrated, and really to help them feel more manageable. It doesn't, it doesn't take away the anxiety, because that's not the point. It was really just to help me manage and control them.
That's a very good point, isn't it? It's about how we deal with this, and also I think what you were saying about making better sense of it, because anxiety is so used now, isn't it? And sometimes it is helpful. I think you're right to actually break down what's going on, which of these are justified as well. I think we're very prone as humans, aren't we, to running away with anxiety, to the point where we're fearing for things which may or may not ever happen in many years' time, right? And that's certainly the case with an early days glaucoma diagnosis, isn't it? With a fair wind and taking your drops as and when, and having your appointments regularly, you probably don't need to be worrying in those early days too much about how bad the vision might get yet, when everything is still going well. But nonetheless, as people, what we tend to do is that often, isn't it? Our minds are off on either worst case scenarios, or I suppose almost being distracted by that. Do you think?
No, I completely agree, and like I said, it's one of those things which, it's not really talked about much,
Mm,
nowadays. It's
mm.
becoming, we're getting more and more awareness of it, and, the impact of mental health, inside glaucoma. But it's one of those things that I strongly urge, a lot of you, if you feel that's the right thing to do, to explore, you know,
It's just
and
worth having a think about, isn't it? I
yes.
guess that traditionally, and of course, the doctors are there for the physical symptoms. That's what they're there for. But I guess you're right. The mental health impact is huge of all of this, and that can easily be neglected. I think it's fair to say sometimes you need to be persistent, don't you, to
Yep.
get the right support with mental health. Um,
I
but
think can I
you know,
one thing I will add actually, Gemma, is
mm,
that you're right. The medical professionals and the ophthalmologists and the eye care specialists, they're there to do a job, but more often than not, they don't see the invisible side of glaucoma,
mm,
as I'll
mm,
call it. The days when, by the time you get to 5 o'clock, you've got so much visual fatigue that, it affects you physically and mentally.
mm,
That those times when looking at a screen suddenly just becomes painful, or where you miss little things and get frustrated out the corner of your vision. If you've got a little bit of vision loss there, or the redness and soreness you get from putting your eye drops in. So, like you said, it's worth talking, to your ophthalmologist as well, and striking up that dialogue.
yes.
And don't be afraid to ask those questions.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, Gemma,
And
we've got 5 minutes to go.
okay, great. Yeah,
Okay.
thank you for that. Um, yeah, and I think, um, as Kesh says, there's various different ways to go about getting additional help. Shall we talk about where to get therapy as well? Because of course this varies so much dependent on where you are, doesn't it? Um, that there are many people that you can talk to. Again, the Ecloson Clinic are often a good place to begin, to talk things through and get that kind of emotional support on the day. Um, some of the vision impairment societies offer specialist services like ourselves. RNIB offer a specialist service, but then there will be local services as well. And you can look online. Talking therapies is what you would be searching these days. That's what the NHS is calling a whole raft of counselling services, okay, including CBT and other types of counselling. You'll often hear CBT advertised. It's one type of counselling. Oftentimes, if a doctor says you need CBT, they just mean they're suggesting therapy generally. They rarely know what that particular type involves, if I'm honest. So talking therapies would mean a referral to somebody within the NHS who would assess what would be the most suitable type of probably short-term, but not necessarily short-term therapy for you, either face-to-face, online, on the phone, various different options. They do vary depending on where you are. And if searching online is difficult, your GP will be aware of the local options. Or if you're lucky and your GP surgery has a mental health nurse, then they would be aware of those options. So that's another way of kind of gathering that information, I think. And like Kesh says, it's not for everybody, but I think it can be a really good place to start. Whether it's right at the beginning of that experience, really, with a diagnosis, or whether things have progressed, and actually clients are dealing with things like no longer driving, when there's much more of an impact. Kesh, have I left anything out there?
No, I think you summed that up really, really well. So,
It's just about keep asking, really, isn't it? Till you find out what's available for you locally,
yes, yeah,
and your
yeah.
various options. There will be private therapists locally as well, yeah, and some low cost options depending on your area. So it's a real mixed bag. I think it's fair to say.
Great.
Right.
Are you okay with that?
I think we're good.
Fantastic. I think you've both
I
done
guess we'll find out what we've left out, won't we, when people
with the questions.
put
Yeah,
in, yeah.
you've both done a fantastic job. Thank you so much. And thank you very much for sharing your experiences professionally and personally. It really means a lot. First question follows on nicely from what you were just saying. Bear with me 1 minute. Am I able to refer myself for token therapy?
Yes, you are. Yes, you don't need that's part of the way that talking therapies works now.
Oh,
So you can refer yourself. It's usually an online form, and every area should have the option to do that referral on the phone if the online form is difficult. But yes,
fantastic.
you do not need to go through the GP.
That's really accessible. Excellent. And then what if I'm struggling to ask about my long-term prognosis?
Yeah, I
How can
think
I deal with that?
this can be a tricky one, can't it? Because, oftentimes appointments may be short, consultants may be rushed, or you mightn't actually see your consultant. Um, and you may feel like actually you did well to get that appointment done without a longer term. I suppose, again, as Kesh was saying, it's your appointment and it's your treatment. You're entitled to ask the questions. Some of this will be uncertain answers, perhaps, but you're certainly entitled to ask them. And again, whether that means bringing someone in for support to make sure that you get that ticked off. But no, obviously you're entitled to do that. Go on, Kesh.
Can I? Yeah, I'll add to that just from my experiences. 25 years ago, that kind of support didn't exist. The ECLOs weren't around, the eye clinic liaison officers, and it was, I was sitting there, with all these questions, and you don't have time. You're right. A lot of these, whereas nowadays you do. And, of course you have, again, I'm going to signpost you towards, the forum on Glaucoma UK, because, sometimes just talking to other people who've been through that, while they're not medical professionals and they're not there to give you medical advice, sometimes just hearing other people's stories, is all you need to kind of give you that confidence, I guess, to then go back and ask, armed with a little bit more knowledge. So, please do, ask those questions when you go to see your consultant or your eye clinic. They honestly, they're so important.
Yeah, if you don't ask, you don't find out.
Mm.
Absolutely. So, next question. Is it possible to request specialist vision loss counselling?
Well, there are certain services which offer this. In fact, although I work for Kent Association for the Blind, as we always say, that's a holistic counselling service. So all our service users are vision impaired, but it's holistic counselling. So it's not just the vision loss. We think it's really important to take everything into account. The RNIB offers a vision loss service, and that's, I believe, a telephone and online service. Offering short-term support. So you'd be able to find out more by getting hold of them at the RNIB.
Excellent. Thank you.
So that's one that I can point to, which is a specialist.
Okay, next question. Have either of you had any experience with Charles Bonnet syndrome? If so, was it difficult to get a diagnosis?
Right, okay. So
I don't know about that. So over to you, Gemma. If you do.
So Charles Bonnet is something that we're very aware of where I work. And for those who are not aware of it, Charles Bonnet is a condition which is kicked off by the vision loss, where what happens is that patients will see images, they'll see hallucinations in effect, silent ones, could be anything from flashing lights through to patterns, through to whole scenes, sometimes people or animals, all sorts of things they might see. Some people just occasionally, and some people really frequently, and it can be a real problem for some people. So it's a really big range of things that people might see. It's caused by the vision dropping down, and it's something that's being kind of investigated. And we're doing our best to raise awareness, because of course, a lot of people get these symptoms and they don't even know what it is. So it's something that we come across quite a lot. I'm not certain of the figures. The estimates are really high, like something like a third or a half of people with vision loss have some visions at some stage. So it's quite big numbers. And the good news is therapy can really help. That's the good news.
Excellent. Fantastic.
Yeah.
Great.
And anxiety strategies can really help. So the Charles Bonnet website has lots of good strategies on there for helping with the symptoms. And a lot of those you'll see they overcross with anxiety strategies. But yes, we have anecdotally, counselling can be really good. So
are you talking about Esme's Umbrella?
that's the one, yes.
Fantastic. Yes, that's the charity that knows all about Charles Bonnet. Fantastic. Next question. I guess either of you could answer this. Re-yoga. I was told not to do the down dog pose because of creating pressure in the eye.
Yeah, there does seem to be some evidence that that's best avoided. And I think where there's some evidence, then we probably go with that and let your instructor know you're avoiding, prolonged positions of that kind.
I think I'll add, I'll also add from my point of view as well that also speak with your ophthalmologist, or your consultant, because it's, the more they know about your lifestyle, the more you're going to get, a much better answer. And I'll give you a great example because I do gymnastics. So there's a lot of inverted positions there in handstands and things like that. And my consultant knows about this. And Gemma's absolutely right. It's when you hold these positions for prolonged periods of time when it starts to raise the IOP or the pressure in your eyes. But in any case, don't stop doing it, but do speak to your consultant and see what they say and go on their advice as well.
Fantastic. Great. It's great advice. Always speak to your consultant if you want to do something different or if you're concerned about something. Fantastic. Thank you for that, Kesh. Next question. How does either of you feel about surgery? I'm currently feeling anxious about the prospect, as I'm being advised this may be the next step for me, as trying several changes of eye drops are not keeping the pressure down satisfactorily. But before you answer the question, I don't know who would like to answer it. I would just like to chip in and let you know about our buddies for surgery at Glaucoma UK. These are volunteers who've been through surgery that you may have proposed for you, and they will be able to talk you through it from the patient experience. So that's a service available from us here at Glaucoma UK. So who would like to answer that question?
I mean, I'll go. I can go on this. I can certainly give my
more eye surgery than me. Go on.
I mean, I've had 2 trabeculectomies, various other poking and prodding procedures. I've had cataracts removed in both eyes, so quite major surgeries. Yes, that it's one of those things where you will get anxious about it, but there are things that will bring that down. And I guess I'm going to come back to making sure you're fully aware of what's going on. Ask the questions. The more you know about why they're doing that, the better. And you know what? There's plenty of time to ask those questions as well. So please do talk to your consultant, and ask those questions, because when you have that understanding, it does tend to calm you down a little bit more. There are other strategies that you can do. I mean, planning around that surgery, as we spoke about earlier as well, is really important, especially the aftercare as well. I got particularly anxious and stressed about how to look after myself or who's going to be there, and I hated people waiting on me with my family, but that's what they're there for. So and obviously someone who's very fit and active, suddenly I couldn't do anything for like 4 weeks or 6 weeks, and I couldn't lift anything. It was like living in a nightmare for me. So I had to figure out strategies beforehand, on what to do in the follow-up, as well. But I will say that the build up to any surgery is usually much larger than the actual surgery itself, because when you come out the other end, you kind of like, oh, was that it? That's how I felt. It wasn't as big a deal as I'd made of it. I mean, that's just coming from my perspective. But I would say the best thing that helped me was knowing everything about my surgery, and asking those questions, and it made me feel so much more comfortable.
Fantastic. Thank you. Next question here is, can you give any more detail about strategies for managing anxiety? You mentioned breathing, but didn't really give us a technique. And anything else you can suggest, please?
Yeah, I think breathing techniques is probably going to be a workshop in itself, particularly this croaky. And I think what I'd say about breathing, and you can get that from your local mindfulness class or your yoga. You can do lots of classes online. Your counselor, if you get a good counselor, will teach you breathing techniques. It almost doesn't matter which one you go for. You've perhaps heard of box breathing, where you're counting 6 as you breathe in, and then 6 as you hold, and 6 as you breathe out, and then 6 again. That's box breathing. That sounding familiar? There's one I quite like, which is a 4-6. So you're in for 4 and out for 6. Okay, the aim being that the out breath is a little bit longer. That's because that starts to calm your nervous system. If you can keep that up for a kind of minute and a half, you start to calm the nervous system even in spite of yourself.
Right.
So it almost doesn't matter which one. It's the practicing it, as Kesh was saying earlier, really, so that you can reach for it when you then need it. And other strategies are those small things, like literally going and standing at the door and getting some fresh air, like breaking it up. Harder to do in the hospital setting, which is why breathing's always the great one, isn't it? That we can do almost anywhere. But oftentimes it's just about changing state with anxiety. So hence, the traditional cup of tea, right? Hot drink, very cold drink, things that are changing state for us. Go to another room. All of these small things. It's just so it's breaking the anxiety, because the anxiety is the physical symptoms. We may still be worried, but we're trying to do away with those intense physical symptoms of panic, fight or flight. Yes.
Great. Thank you for that, Gemma. Kesh, I think this one's for you. Do exercises such as press-ups, planks, etc., where head is facing down, raise IOP, interocular pressure?
So as far as I'm aware, doing exercises where you are kind of in that, we call it a prone position or a horizontal position, so where you're kind of facing down horizontally. Again, it's for prolonged periods of time, and if you're holding your breath as well, which can potentially increase IOP. Again, if you are doing a lot of these exercises and you've recently been diagnosed with glaucoma, speak to your consultant, so they are aware of this, because I think that's just a clever thing to do, and it will give you some assurance and confidence as well. But from my point of view, I've been doing these for years, and I will say that every time I do change my exercise routine, I do let my consultant know, because I feel that's the best thing to do for my eye health, and it's useful in case there is anything contraindicated in that respect. But I think those exercises are generally okay, but I would suggest you go and speak to your consultant so that they are aware that you are doing them on a regular basis.
Fantastic. That's great advice, Kesh. Now I know why you got the job on the helpline. Fantastic. Right, I'm going to blend the next two questions together, and they're going to be for you, Kesh. So do you have any advice for dealing with major life changes resulting from glaucoma? For instance, having to give up driving when there is no one to help out with this.
I mean, I can certainly share my experiences, with you, because I think that probably fits me quite perfectly. I had to give up driving in my 40s when I was raising a small family, a young family, where I really needed to drive. At least that's how I felt at the time. And I would probably say I can count all of the life-changing moments on one hand, and that was one of them. So I remember it very, very well. It was extremely difficult, because I felt as though my independence had been kind of taken away, and to an extent, my mobility, because you forget that driving around and getting from A to B, it's one of those things you take for granted, and then suddenly that goes. So for me, that was hard, but I love to adapt, but I have a mindset of where, I look at what I can do. I look at how I can adapt around it, and then I create routines around that. And it's those three things that we kind of coming back to that Gemma and I spoke about earlier as well. So yes, it is difficult and it is challenging, but I prefer the word challenging, because you can find ways to adapt. For example, I knew I could still use my legs and I could walk and I was fit and healthy. So I used to find new ways to just take public transport or to just walk. For me, fortunately, most things are within walking distance, and I call walking distance 40 minutes. I mean, that might be different for some of you guys, but that works for me. And it's important to find what works for you. Again, I wish I'd known this earlier, but ask for help. My family are so supportive, but also, like I guess extended family and friends, you'll be surprised at how much people want to help, no matter how difficult you think it is to ask,
Absolutely.
so that's important as well.
I
There are
totally
ways
agree.
to get through that. Yeah.
I really like the way we can wrap up. We've done all the questions. That's fantastic. And I think I'd just like to hook on to three words Kesh said, and that was ask for help. If you need help, do ask for help. So, I'm got the helpline details here on the screen. If there's any further questions you have after tonight, please do call the helpline on 01233 648170 or email. And it's a really easy email address. It's helpline@Glaucoma UK. So we're open 9:30 to 5 on weekdays. Our next webinar will be a TRAB deep dive, and that's on the 12th of January next year at 7 p.m. And that will be with a consultant ophthalmic surgeon called Philip Bloom. So just a reminder that your circumstances are unique to you. So if you're thinking of making any lifestyle changes or medical changes as a result of this webinar, please speak to your eye specialist first. Glaucoma UK and the speakers are not responsible for any action you might take as a result of the information you learn through this webinar. If you have any other questions that you would like to ask related to glaucoma, please do give the helpline a call. That's why we're here. We're here for you if you've got glaucoma. So before we wrap up for the evening, I will share the final poll that will hopefully show that we have all learned something from tonight's session. If you just bear with me a moment, I will do that. Sorry about that. 1 second. Sorry. Just a moment. Sorry, I'm struggling here for a second. You just bear with me. Second. I'm afraid I can't get the poll to work. I'm really, really sorry about that. So if you just bear with me one more moment, please. Finally, we are going to have, and before we wrap up for the evening, I will share the final poll. I've done that, tried to do that, it didn't work, sorry. You also have a chance to nominate someone for the Excellence in Glaucoma Care Award. We would like to acknowledge the poll has gone up now, which is fantastic. Thank you to my colleague in the background. We would like to acknowledge and celebrate the wonderful teams and volunteers at your hospitals, local sight loss societies, and excellent support groups. As part of your glaucoma journey, have you benefited from the support and guidance of such a team? Support can come in many forms, such as advice on administering eye drops, surgery options, emotional support, or advice regarding driving requirements. So long as the support received has been above and beyond expectations, there will be details on how to submit a nomination on the email you will receive following this webinar. But for anyone who would like the QR code, it is on the screen now. So please consider completing the survey, which will launch when this webinar ends. We want these sessions to be great, so the more feedback we receive, the better the sessions we will be able to provide. Before we go, I think I would like to say a massive thank you to Kesh and Gemma. I think they've done a fantastic session with us this evening. I would like to thank you all for joining us. I'd like to say have a wonderful evening, and we will see you in the new year at another webinar, hopefully. And all I can say is have a great Christmas and look after yourself. And if you need help, do ask. So thank you very much, everybody, for spending your time with us this evening. And good night. Take care.